Hi, my name is Judy Pedersen, and I welcome you to the Grief to Grit podcast. I've been a grief counselor for more than 20 years, and during those years, I have learned a lot. From the families I've served, the communities I've visited, and the many times grief has come from the most unpredictable places. This work is the reason why I formed our Hearts of Hope Foundation to help people navigate the awkward journey of loss. We do this through counseling resources, educational workshops, and our Healing Art community program. What I've learned the most is this: I still have so much to learn. That's what inspired me to create the Grief to Grit podcast. I want to share what I've learned, and I want to hear from you about your grief experiences, challenges, and the things that have helped. Ask me your questions, and I'll ask you some of mine too. The millions of us grievers out there never wanted to be part of this club. We travel this unfamiliar and unpredictable journey toward hope and healing. And when we get to share with one another, that path becomes a little less lonely. Let's keep learning and let's keep healing together. In this episode, we'll be talking about athletes and their challenges as they experience loss and triumph. We'll also ask about how legacy building begins early for an athlete and how it carries forward throughout time. I feel privileged to have as my guest today an esteemed teacher, counselor, and coach, Mr. JD Hawkins. JD's accomplishments throughout his career have taken him from an athlete, an elite athlete in basketball and baseball, to a high school teacher and athletic coach, to college level teaching and coaching. During this time, JD's awards have been numerous and include becoming a national certified counselor. He received the Award of Excellence from the Illinois State Board of Education. He was the Counselor of the Year from the Illinois State School System. He's a teacher who formed an exchange program in Germany and in Japan. JD's accomplishments also include publications, which include Captain's Leadership Development Program, the Healthy Self-Esteem, The Difference Makes the Difference Program, the Need for and Guidelines for Developing Suicide Prevention Programs in School. And that's the short list. It's a pleasure to have you, JD. And as you know, today's focus is loss, triumph, and legacy. You know a lot about each one of the three of those. I wonder if you could share what these mean to you in the context of every aspect of your career, including those young people you have coached.
Well, I grew up on a farm, and my goal was not the farm. And so all the way I stayed out of it was to play sports. My dad had this saying: if you don't like your situation, educate yourself out of it. And I struggled in my education at that point, so didn't have the skills. Growing up in a one-room grade school, you don't get all those skills. So I figured, well, I might as well use something that I got, which is some skills to play ball. And so that's what I set out to do. And went on to college and got that, had some successes there. One success, I guess, I graduated, so got to go on and go into the coaching field. And
Yes,
thinking that I'd probably spend the rest of my life, working life coaching. But events happen and things change, and so they did. And I experienced a lot of things that made some major differences in my life, and so
you certainly have. What is can you, I'm so sorry. Can you tell us what it takes, both physically and emotionally?
Well, as an athlete, it's very time consuming, and I've always thought that, an athlete has certain skills, and it can be in a social setting, it can be in probably in individual sports and group sports, and you take the skill and you work to develop it. And I've always thought of it as being in basketball, baseball, track, soccer, men and women's sports, things like that. But in the last few years, since I basically got out of the coaching field, the thing called e-sport has come around. E-sport is where people have those same skills and they drive for excellence in those skills, but it can be things. I first noticed it when I heard race car drivers calling themselves athletes, and I thought, what? And then when I got thinking about it and put it to my definition, then I began to see when social media started coming around, these groups coming together and competing and debate teams. And so there's a lot of different kinds of sports, and esports has really expanded it. And I'm really glad to see that. So.
That's incredible. It truly is. The evolution is incredible. JD, today's topic includes loss and triumph. And, as you're in your years coaching, it occurs to me that the young people experienced, of course, it's easy to conceptualize and to understand what it feels like to accomplish something, to win a game. But there's loss involved every time the game is not won. And, those losses are sometimes equal to or more than the times that there's a win. And I wonder if you could speak to the loss aspect and kind of just how the two are so opposite, and how did you manage young people in both scenarios? And being that our focus is on loss, I'm very curious about that piece, but also as 1 week might be a loss, 1 week might be a win. And how did those young people react to that, and how did you help them?
Well, I think I was, in my early career, I was on that, as I had been involved in athletes, you win, the whole idea is to win, but then I began to realize that there's lots of ways of winning as an athlete rather than your score being higher. And I really, really learned this and have a problem with this attitude that you win at all costs. Because the young athletes, or any athlete really, whenever they win at all cost attitude, then they're always stressed, don't know what the next step is. Whereas if you're teaching the values of what you're doing and those kind of things, then you end up wanting to win, and you're going into it with the attitude, if I've done the best that I can, even though my score may not be as high as the other, then I have done a good thing. I've done the best I can. And so I think teaching from that perspective, I see people like, famous people like Nick Saban, for example, head of the Alabama Crimson Tide. This is totally where he comes from, and I really love that approach. His emphasis is not on winning at all costs, but the goal is to win. But to go out and to give your best and be involved and alert and applying that skill that you have to the best of your ability, and being able to walk off of that football field and say, I did the best I can. That's really what it's all about.
Well, I love hearing that. And it's, for the people that I have known, there have been some, not many, but the people that I've known that have achieved at higher levels of, within sports and as athletes, as I see them in years beyond sports, from what you've said, I guess I can say that I've seen that, because these are the people that appear to go out into the world and they still maintain that, that approach, that it's not win at all costs, it's what can I do myself and what can I do as the team. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that, because you win, or you learn the skills. You learn patience, you learn what honesty is, develop rapport with other people. You have a balanced life from it. Whereas, someday you're not going to be able to be the athlete. And so if you don't get these values during that process, then you don't have to fall back on it. And I think that in itself is a loss, because you have these people who have so much going for them and can touch so many lives, not only during their athletic careers, but after their athletic careers. But if they instill these values along the way, then they've got something to fall back on and continue to make a difference throughout their life.
Yes, that makes sense. I'll tell you something very funny. I have my best friend's husband was a really elite athlete. He coached lacrosse at his college, and one day he tried to give me a high five. I had to actually learn how to do it because the first time he put his hand up and I tried to hit his hand, I missed. And he kept saying, "You're not doing it right." So I had a little lesson on doing a high five, and for the most part, it's worked out pretty well. But that you just described this man so perfectly, and the other folks that I know as well. So JD, you were a teacher and a coach, and then later in your career, you went back and secured a degree in counseling. Can you describe what motivated you to do that?
Well, I was in education for 38 years, and I thought, hey, I'll just be a coach. And back then, you had to be a classroom teacher, both, and so I just took it for granted. I had my athletes, and we tried to go out and make every performance fun and challenging. For my job to make it challenging to him. And I thought that I was really helping develop values for the young people. And then one day I was teaching in New Mexico, where I had a job at a high school, and I had a chance to coach some very outstanding young athletes. They recycle through high schools, and you'll have some good teams, and you'll have some low teams, but I had some good athletes, and one of them in particular, he was being recruited all over the United States, and we was all so happy for him and everything. And the day he signed to play football with collegiate level, he went home and put a gun to his chest and took his life. And that was just, I mean, we're in a small town. We didn't have resources. People looked to me because I was director of guidance at that point, and I didn't even see this coming. And it was at that point I made a vow that I would never be in that position again, where I didn't at least have the knowledge to recognize the symptoms that these athletes and the pressures that they go through and how it builds up. And the one thing that I realized early on that I couldn't get this by being in the job I was out in the middle of the desert, which I was pretty close to the high desert in New Mexico. So I started looking for alternatives, how I can gain this knowledge. And so I looked at a placement office at the University of New Mexico one day, and I seen this bulletin board hanging on a bulletin board on the wall, and a note on the bulletin board. And I went over there and I started to look at it, and then lost interest in it, and I turned away, and then I rubbed it. There wasn't any place to sit. My shoulder rubbed it, and it fell off on the floor, and I picked it up and stuck it back up there. The same thing happened, fell over, and I picked it back up. And I said, maybe this paper is trying to tell me something. So I picked it up and read it, and lo and behold, Illinois State University needs somebody with where I'm at in my career. And next day I called and applied, and the rest is history. That's where I went to. But that gave me the chance then to take my learning to a different level, to where I could really start making a positive difference in a lot of young people's life, and from the perspective of suicide prevention and teaching others how to do that. Because I'm a big believer that I've seen this someplace early on in my life, but this guy walking along the beach, and you see these starfish all over the beach, and this guy, it's imperative that these starfish get back in the water to continue to live. And so this guy's going along, and he sees one guy throwing the starfish one at a time back in there. And he said, you can't save all these starfish alive. He said, no, but it will make a big difference to this one, as he threw it back in the water. So that come to my perspective and has been a driving force for me, of reaching out. You're one person, but reaching out and do one at a time can make a difference in a lot of people's life, those you come directly in charge to. The university wanted me to do more. They wanted me to make available to several others. And so that's how I developed some of the programs that gave me support to do that. Suicide prevention and other programs that I developed to work with young athletes and helping them to be better athletes and to be role models, positive role models.
Yes. The lifelong skills that go beyond the next game. Yes, I think that it makes perfect sense. I'm thinking back to that high schooler who took his own life. And I think the athletes from that time must continue to have the memory of not only that event, but the memory of helping you cope as part of that lifelong memory. And I know that you have kept in touch with some of them. I think you've kept in touch with a lot of them. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit about, well, the whole experience, who you've kept in touch with and where they've gone and how they've dealt with a loss at such a young life, such a young period in their lives. And then going forward, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
To start off with is suicide is a contagious thing. This young man took his life and nobody knew how to react, but his friends began to react in ways like, hey, he's not going to be here anymore. Maybe I can go and be with him now. And so we had a lot of suicide ideation going on. And so we worked with those kids. I actually felt like it was the blind leading the blind quite a bit, but have since found out that we did make some positive difference, but that guided me to go to a different level so I understand it better. But as I was going on and becoming better educated, it forced me, you only have so much time in a day, it forced me to lose contact with a lot of these kids and a lot of these athletes. So after a period of time when technologies started coming back, like Facebook, for example, I mean, back when all this happened, we're talking about, it wasn't such a thing. Social media was non-existent. I think at that time we was struggling with trying to get one computer in the whole school, so kids could experience
yes.
typewriter, those kind of things. But I began to see that I was losing contact. So when Facebook came out, as I said, I started reconnecting with these people, the former students and stuff. And that has been one of my absolute joys, is to go back and to reconnect with them and ask them the questions. What did you? It had to be tough on you. I know it was very tough on me, and it had to be even tougher on you. But how did you get through that? And I found out two things. I found out a lot of strategies that they used that I hadn't thought of in my work. And then the other one that I found out that even though you don't know what you're doing, just doing something can make a difference, and reaching out and being there for them. And so that's reinforced me from that perspective. And so we have good contacts. As I travel around the country, my wife and I travel, and we try to do that quite a bit nowadays. When we go through areas where these young people may be living, well, we try to look them up and invite them out to a restaurant or something, one of their favorite restaurants, and really eat and throw around old ideas and things we did. And they all remember something about me that I never dreamed. Found out a lot about myself as we've done this. But it's just a very rewarding thing, and I would encourage any teacher who's to reach out to the kids, because the kid's only there with you sometimes for months, sometimes 3, but 4 years usually at the max, and staying connected with those young people and continue to learn and grow, both of you, from one another, and support. So it's been a great experience for me.
It's an incredible story. So with all of this, What would the good news be here? What would you say that people can think about, and what can you say that people can try to do when any of the challenges come up for athletes, but certainly when there's a loss? I know that for me, as a grief counselor all these years, there are so many times that people will call me and say, "This tragedy occurred. What should I do? This happened. What should I do?" And you've said it. You've said it, JD. You show up, and showing up can be anything, can it? It can be making a phone call. It can be sending a card, a text. But I think the thing that people who have experienced tragic events, I think the thing that the takeaway, or the thing that they remember most, is this person showed up for me. And that's an important aspect. And not only as their teacher and as their coach did you show up for them with that tragedy, and with all of the other young people you coached, you've shown up. And now, even now, through social media, you continue to show up. Imagine, I am blown away by that. And I think that our listeners will be too, because that's what you did, and that's what works for these young people. So I guess that, I guess that's my question for you. What is the good news that people can take away? What are the tips, or maybe what are some of the behaviors that people can lean on to help young people with, losses can be anything, can't they? And loss can feel so big. With the loss of just one game, certainly ratchet that up to the loss of a person. What can you recommend that helps?
I think the first thing is, we as adults or athletes and people around young people, and young people with younger people, is to realize that what might be a loss to one person may not seem like a loss at all to the other person. And so I think you have to take time to look at your friends, look at your neighborhoods, look at what's going on with that person. And whenever you see things that are not normal, to reach out. I always try to take pride. One thing I learned from the young people, whenever, like the suicide thing, they form together and they lean on one another and they work together and they do a lot of wonderful things. But when it's all done and everybody goes in their opposite direction, that person who was affected most, that's when we as adults can really reach out and make a difference, because they've had all this hoopla and support, and then it just gradually migrates away. They don't have it there, then things are going to go awry for them, and that's when great opportunity for you to give that phone call, throw that text, and it's so easy to do nowadays. Anybody. I have trouble with technology, but texting is a great thing. I have a younger brother, he and I together, an older brother. We all were coaches. All farm boys turned coaches, but that's one thing we've struggled to do, is stay up with technology, but we do it enough to where we can stay in touch with people we should stay in touch with. So I think realizing that everybody's going to have a loss, everybody's going to have a problem. It's just human nature, and be sensitive to that and open to that and reaching out. You don't have to have the answers. I learned this early in my career. One day as a counselor, I was sitting in my office and working on something, and the head person walked in, the superintendent walked in and said, "Got a minute, JD?" And I said, "Yeah." He sat down and said, "Can I close the door?" And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." And he sat there and he talked, and he talked, and he talked. And I just shook my head, yes, okay, agreed with him. And wow, every once in a while, man, how do you do it? And then after a while, he stands up and he wants to shake my hand. He said, "I really appreciate the help you guys gave me." And he opens the door and walks out. And it was at that point I realized you don't have to give answers. You don't have to do any more than that. And that person, because you have allowed them and you accepted them where they are, and what they are at that particular point, and just took the time to listen. Very powerful is listening, and a very great tool that many people don't have, because I can always sit and look at a person, and I know whenever I'm talking, if they're thinking about how they're going to answer me, then I've lost them. They're not listening anymore. So
That's true.
I think
Yes.
it's skill that that we all we've got the opportunity as long as we're able to hear, and but reaching out, listening, and not judging, I think is another big thing. And then realizing that you can make a difference, realizing that no matter what level you are, you can make a difference in people's lives, and that there's always somebody watching you. You are a role model to somebody. I don't care who that you are a role model to somebody. I mean, whether it's good or whether it's bad, you are a role model. And I think that's important and something we need to teach more of, especially to young athletes. That
Yes.
they're watching. Your little brother, your little sister, your neighbor, your kids you go in front of or around, they're always watching, and they're trying to be an image of you. And so it's very important that you're aware of that is going on, and how that can affect others. Whether
Yes.
you're demonstrating good behaviors or not so good behaviors, it's important.
It truly, truly is. I've there's an exercise that I've done with young people, and it's a resilience exercise. And the first part of it is, who inspires you? And you've just hit on that. And then, that's easy. So, for young people, they've got this one, that one, the other one, the list is long. And then the next part of it is, who have you inspired? And that goes to exactly what you just said. Someone is always watching what you're doing, and they're taking cues from you. And I love that. I love that. And it's absolutely right. And it's not that we have to be deliberately trying to show anything. It's just be that person. And whoever observes that is learning. And I love that. I'd like to close with the last part of this, because we've talked about loss and triumph, and I would like to close with just a little bit of a discussion about legacy. So I know that you've reached out to a lot of your former students. I'd love for you to talk to the number that you reached out to, and how would you describe just maybe your legacy? I think that you have discussed the legacy of some of your students and some of the athletes you've coached, but how would you define your legacy in light of everything that you've done?
Well, I think it's passing on something. It may come in the form of character, reputation, how you've led or not led. Legacy to me is very, very important. I never thought of it till later in my life, and probably began to think of it when I started reconnecting with some of my former students. But our dad always told us, you got it just makes a difference if you live a good, wholesome life. People are going to pick up on that, and they need role models. He had a good role model, and he wanted us to be good role models when we left the farm. He said, "Well, today's your last day on this job." He said, "I don't want to see you back here. I want to see you out there making a positive difference." And so that was our goal. He set his legacy was to set us out there, position us so that we would have a foundation to go out and do that. And so I think that's what legacy is. You're laying a foundation for others to follow you. That's what it is to me.
That's what I hear. It truly sounds as though that is your legacy, the mark that you've left. You didn't speak to this yet, but I know in a prior conversation you said you reached out to 700 of your former athletes, and that is the most astounding thing, because as part of your legacy, you've never stopped teaching, you've never stopped coaching them and helping them to complete and to build their legacies. And I think that is really remarkable.
Thank you. I feel good about that part of it in my life. A lot of the programs that I got, I made sure that other people were there to pick them up and go on, and I think that's happening. Every once in a while, I have one of those people call me and say, "Hey, you know what? This is still working, and we still remember you." And I might not have seen those people. Now, I've been retired for almost 18 years from that field, but I still get those accolades. That I think that's a part of my legacy that I'm able to experience before I'm even.
Yes, it's quite remarkable. JD, I thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I am in awe of what you have done, and I think our listeners will be too. It's a story that most of us will never know, and it's a story that will inspire everyone that I can think of. I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you. I hope you have enjoyed our discussion with Coach JD Hawkins. It truly has been a joy for me. If you'd like to reach out with your stories and experiences, I would love to hear from you. I want to hear what works and what doesn't. Feel free to email podcast@ourheartsofhope.org. You can listen and subscribe to the Grief to Grit podcast wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Thank you for sharing a few minutes of your time with JD and me, and for making space to take care of your grief. Until next time, grieve on and let your legacy grow with every one of your life's experiences.